Cops mistreated a single mom until her son made one call, and the mayor answered. Single mom, Desiree, was mistreated by cops. They wanted to search her house and questioned her like a criminal, just because she was black and lived in the suburbs. But when her son made one phone call, everything changed. The mayor himself got involved and turned the situation upside down. One day, Desiree was at home, cooking dinner and helping her son with homework. It was a normal day, just like any other. Until there was a knock at the door. When she opened it, she saw two police officers standing on her porch. "Can I help you?" she asked, confused. "We received a report about suspicious activity in this residence," one of the officers said, looking past her into the house. "What kind of suspicious activity?" Desiree asked, now feeling a bit nervous. "We can't disclose the details of the report," the officer said. "We just need to come in and take a look around." "Do you have a warrant?" she asked. "No," the officer said, "but we can get one if necessary." Desiree stood her ground. "Then I'm sorry, but you can't come in without a warrant." The officer's demeanor changed instantly. He looked annoyed. "Ma'am, we can make this easy or we can make it hard," he said. "That sounds like a threat," Desiree replied. "It's not a threat, it's a choice," the officer said, stepping closer. "Please step back," she said firmly. Her son, Marcus, was watching from the hallway, scared. "Mom, what's happening?" he asked. "It's okay, baby," she said, trying to stay calm. "Go to your room." But Marcus didn't go. He stood there, holding his phone tightly. The officers kept pressing. "We received a tip about drugs being sold from this house," one of them said. "That's ridiculous," Desiree said. "I've lived here for 5 years. I work 2 jobs. I take care of my son. We've never had any trouble with the law." "Well, tips can come from neighbors, friends, or even people who don't like you," the officer shrugged. "We still have to follow up." "Then come back with a warrant," she said again. The officers didn't like that. One of them muttered something under his breath. Desiree closed the door slowly and locked it. She leaned against it, heart pounding. She had never been in trouble before. She didn't even have a parking ticket. Marcus came over to her. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," she said, hugging him. "But those cops, they looked like they wanted to hurt you," he said. "I know," she whispered. "But we did the right thing." Marcus nodded. Then he pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm calling Uncle James," he said. Uncle James wasn't really his uncle. He was Desiree's childhood friend. But he was also the mayor of their city. Desiree tried to stop him, but he had already pressed the call button. "Marcus?" James answered. "Everything okay?" "Uncle James, the police came to our house. They tried to force their way in. They said Mom was selling drugs. But that's not true." James's voice got serious. "Put your mom on the phone." Desiree took the phone, embarrassed. "James, I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Tell me exactly what happened." She told him everything. The knock, the questions, the refusal to show a warrant. James was quiet for a moment. "Okay. I'm going to make a few calls. Stay put. Don't open the door for anyone unless it's me." Desiree hung up, still shaken. Within 30 minutes, there was another knock at the door. This time, it was James, standing there with the police chief. The chief looked uncomfortable. "Ms. Taylor, I want to apologize for what happened earlier," he said. "Those officers were out of line. They had no probable cause and should not have come to your house without a warrant." James nodded. "I've already suspended them pending an investigation," he said. "This is not how we treat our citizens." Desiree felt tears in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Marcus hugged her tightly. James turned to her. If anything like this ever happens again, call me. No one should be treated like that in their own home. From that day on, Desiree noticed a change. The police in her neighborhood became more respectful, more careful. Word had spread that the mayor wouldn't tolerate abuse of power. Desiree's story became a local headline: Mayor intervenes after police mistreat single mom. People started asking questions. Why were the officers so quick to believe a false tip? Was it because of race? Because she was a single mom? Or just bad policing? James launched a citywide review of police conduct. New policies were introduced. Training was updated. Community policing initiatives were expanded. Desiree was invited to speak at a town hall meeting. She stood up, holding Marcus's hand, and shared her story. I'm not asking for special treatment, she said. I'm asking for fairness, for respect, for safety in our own homes. The crowd applauded. And Marcus? He became a local hero. People admired his courage for making that phone call. You saved me, Desiree told him one night. I just wanted to help, he said. And he did. One call changed everything. In a world where injustice can feel overwhelming, one voice can still make a difference. Desiree went back to her daily routine, but something inside her had shifted. The fear that had taken root that night didn't disappear immediately. She found herself jumping at sudden knocks on the door, glancing over her shoulder more often when walking to her car, double-checking if the doors were locked, even during the day. Marcus noticed too. Mom, he said one evening, you don't have to be scared anymore. Desiree smiled weakly. I know, baby. I'm not scared. Just, careful. But Marcus could see it in her eyes. The trauma was lingering. A few weeks later, the city council invited Desiree to a closed-door session. They wanted her input on reforms, real change, not just promises. She was hesitant at first. I'm not a politician, she told James. I'm just a mom. And that's exactly why we need you, James replied. You're the voice we've been missing. She agreed, nervously. At the session, she spoke plainly. No one should be treated like a suspect in their own home. Especially not in front of their children. We teach our kids to trust the police. But how can we, when this is how we're treated? There was a heavy silence in the room after she spoke. Then, one council member stood up. I want to propose a motion, he said. We name a new civilian oversight board, and I nominate Desiree Taylor as one of its founding members. The motion passed unanimously. Desiree was stunned. That night, she told Marcus. You're looking at a board member now, she said, half joking. Marcus grinned. That's cool. Are you gonna make laws now? Not laws, she laughed. Just try to make sure the laws are followed. Over the next few months, Desiree dove headfirst into her new role. She met with other victims of police misconduct. She helped draft new protocols for search and seizure. She pushed for mandatory body cameras and stricter consequences for violations. She also worked with community leaders to create a public education campaign, Know Your Rights, aimed at young people. Knowledge is power, she told a classroom full of high schoolers. The more you know about your rights, the safer you'll be. Marcus, meanwhile, had become more confident too. He started a school club called Youth Justice, where students could talk about social issues, learn about civic engagement, and plan volunteer projects. One afternoon, he stood in front of his classmates and said, I used to think adults handled everything. But sometimes, they need us to speak up too. That's what I did for my mom, and I'll do it again if I have to. His words were shared on social media, and the clip went viral. Local news outlets picked up the story. Brave kid sparks city reform, the headlines read. Desiree couldn't believe it. Are we famous? she joked. Marcus shrugged. A little. But fame wasn't the goal. Change was. And it was happening. The police department began holding monthly town halls. Body cam footage was released within 48 hours of any complaint. And officers were required to complete de-escalation training every year. Desiree became a go-to speaker for justice conferences, even receiving a national award for civic leadership. Still, she stayed grounded. "I'm just a mom who wanted to cook dinner and help with homework," she often said. But everyone knew she was more than that. She was a symbol of resilience. One day, James invited her to City Hall again. This time, it was for a ceremony. As she entered the chamber, she saw a plaque being unveiled. It read, "In honor of Desiree Taylor and all who stand for justice." Below it, a quote. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." Desiree blinked back tears. Marcus hugged her tightly. "You deserve this," he said. Later, on the steps of City Hall, reporters asked her if she had any final words. She looked into the cameras and said, "Never underestimate the power of one voice. Especially when it's telling the truth." The crowd applauded. And just like that, a single mom's worst night had become the catalyst for a city's rebirth. Back at home that evening, Desiree finally felt peace. She tucked Marcus into bed. "Good night, hero," she said. "Good night, Mom," he replied sleepily. Outside, the street was quiet. Safe. She looked out the window and whispered, "Thank you." Because sometimes, justice begins not in a courtroom, but in a living room. With a knock, a refusal, and a child brave enough to make one call. Desiree's journey didn't end with a plaque or a ceremony. In many ways, that was just the beginning. People began to reach out to her, not just from her own city, but from towns and counties across the state. Letters, emails, messages poured in from single moms, teenagers, senior citizens, even retired officers. They shared stories, some heartbreaking, some hopeful, about their own experiences with law enforcement, about injustice, about fear, about standing up when it mattered. Desiree read every message. Some brought her to tears. Others filled her with determination. She realized that what had happened to her wasn't unique. But how she had responded, and how her city had listened, was. And maybe, just maybe, her story could inspire other cities to do the same. So, she started speaking publicly, not just at local events, but statewide. She called it the One Call movement. Her message was simple. One call can expose injustice. One voice can start reform. One stand can protect a generation. Marcus often came with her, sitting in the front row, sometimes even standing beside her at the podium. People loved seeing them together, a mother and son, united by love, courage, and a shared mission. Desiree always made sure to include him. "He's the reason I found my voice," she said. "He's the reason I didn't give up." Eventually, the One Call movement expanded. They created a nonprofit. They raised funds to provide legal aid for families dealing with unlawful searches or police harassment. They built a hotline. They hosted workshops, training, neighborhood forums. Desiree recruited volunteers, most of them parents and teens. She never paid herself a salary. "This is for the community," she said. "Not a job. A calling." And communities noticed. Police departments began reaching out proactively, asking for help reviewing their own policies. One chief said, "We want to get ahead of the next tragedy." Desiree didn't shy away. She met with them, face to face, even the ones who seemed defensive or dismissive. "I'm not here to blame," she'd say. "I'm here to build trust. To protect families. Yours and mine." Slowly, attitudes began to shift. Meanwhile, Marcus's Youth Justice Club grew from a school group to a citywide student coalition. They organized marches. They held debates on justice, race, power. They interviewed local leaders, wrote op-eds, even got airtime on the radio. Marcus was elected class president, but his peers called him something else, the voice. One teacher said, "I've never seen a student move people like that. He doesn't just talk, he lifts." Desiree watched it all with awe. She'd always known Marcus was special. But now the world saw it too. And yet, despite the recognition, the awards, the headlines, Desiree stayed humble. Every morning, she packed Marcus's lunch, helped with homework, cleaned the kitchen. Every night, she prayed. Not for success. But for strength. To keep going. To keep standing. Because there were still people who doubted her. People who said she exaggerated. That the officers were just doing their job. That it wasn't about race, or class, or power. Desiree didn't argue with them. She didn't shout. She just told her story. And let the truth speak for itself. One night, she was invited to speak at a statewide policing summit. It was the biggest crowd she'd ever faced, over 1,000 people. Police, judges, mayors, activists, parents. She stood on stage, took a breath, and said, "3 years ago, I was scared in my own home. Not of criminals. But of those who were supposed to protect me. I felt powerless. But my son reminded me that power doesn't come from a badge. It comes from doing what's right. And sometimes, justice starts with the word no." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. After the event, an officer approached her. He was young, nervous. "Ms. Taylor," he said, "I joined the force because of people like you. I wanted to change things from the inside. I just want you to know, we hear you. We see you. And we're trying." Desiree smiled, shook his hand. "Thank you," she said. "That means more than you know." Back home, life settled into a rhythm again. Normal, but different. Stronger. One Saturday morning, as they ate pancakes, Marcus asked, "Mom, do you think things are really changing?" She looked at him, thoughtful. "Not everywhere," she said. "Not yet. But here." "Yes. And that's a start." He nodded. "Good. Because I don't ever want another kid to see their mom scared like I did." Desiree reached over, held his hand. "You made sure they won't." Later that week, Marcus submitted an essay to a national contest. The theme was, "Heroes in Our Lives." He wrote, "My hero isn't famous. She doesn't wear a cape. But she stood up to fear, to power, to injustice. She protected me with nothing but her voice and her love. My hero is my mom." He won first place. The judges said it was the most moving thing they'd read all year. Desiree framed the essay and hung it in the hallway. Every time she walked past, she smiled. Because in the end, it wasn't about awards, or titles, or even policy. It was about something deeper. A mother's love. A child's courage. A community's strength. And a future rewritten. Not by force. But by faith. Not by power. But by purpose. Because justice, real justice, isn't just a system. It's a story. And they had changed theirs. Together. As Desiree's story continued to spread, so did the ripples of her impact. News crews came from out of state. Documentaries were made. One evening, while flipping through the channels, Marcus shouted, "Mom! Look! There she was, her face on screen, her voice narrating a trailer." The title read, "The Call That Changed Everything." Desiree sat down slowly, stunned. They had used real footage, her actual 911 call, interviews with community leaders, and even Marcus's school speech. She didn't know how to feel. Honored? Nervous? Grateful? Maybe all three. The documentary aired that fall, and social media exploded. People were moved, outraged, inspired. #OneCall trended for weeks. In cities all across the country, community groups began organizing, citing her story as their spark. Mayors referenced her in press conferences. Some police chiefs started their own internal reviews before any incidents even happened. Desiree began getting invited to universities, law schools, civil rights symposiums. They wanted to hear her first-hand account, how it felt, how it changed her, what she learned, and what others could do differently. At one Ivy League event, a student asked her, "Ms. Taylor, how did you find the strength to speak up?" Desiree paused, then said, "I didn't feel strong. I felt angry. I felt scared. But I had to protect my son. And I think that's what courage really is, doing it anyway." The audience was silent, then burst into applause. Back home, Desiree kept things simple. She still worked her hospital shifts. Still packed Marcus's lunch. Still watched crime dramas on the couch with a blanket. But she was never the same woman who once flinched at her own front door. She was grounded now. Solid. Rooted in purpose. One weekend, she hosted a community cookout. Families, activists, even some local officers came. Kids played soccer. Neighbors shared food. There was laughter. It felt, as someone said, like healing. Desiree stood up and clinked a glass. "I just want to say thank you," she began. "To all of you. For standing with us. For believing that things could be better. That we could be better. This," she gestured around, "this is what change looks like. It starts with pain, but it grows into peace." People nodded, teary-eyed. An elderly woman came up afterward. "Child, I've seen a lot in my years," she said. "But I ain't never seen a mother turn fear into fire like you did." Desiree hugged her tight. "I had to. For him." Marcus stood nearby, beaming. As the years passed, the one-call movement became a fixture in the community, like the library or the fire station. They opened an office downtown. Painted murals. Created an internship program for teens interested in law, activism, and public service. Marcus led the first cohort. He called it Youth for Justice. They helped draft proposals, testified at hearings, mentored younger kids. One summer, they traveled to D.C. for a national youth summit. Marcus delivered a keynote. He said, "When my mom said no, she wasn't just protecting herself, she was protecting all of us. And I learned that silence protects no one. But truth. Truth can change everything." He received a standing ovation. Desiree watched from the wings, tears in her eyes. Later, a senator approached them both. "You're raising a leader," she said. Desiree smiled. "I'm just trying to raise a good man." As Marcus grew older, he began thinking about college, career, his future. One evening, while sitting on the porch, he asked, "Mom, do you think I should go into law?" Desiree took a moment. "I think," she said, "you should go wherever your heart leads. As long as you keep leading with truth." He nodded. "I just want to make a difference. Like you did." She reached over, touched his hand. "You already have." Time moved on. Desiree kept working, speaking, mentoring. Marcus graduated with honors. Went to college. Came back to help run the nonprofit. Together, they expanded the mission, helping communities nationwide build bridges between residents and officers, creating accountability without losing safety. They launched online training. Partnered with law schools. Began drafting model policies for cities to adopt. At one national conference, Desiree stood before a crowd of thousands and said, When you empower the people most affected by injustice to be part of the solution, you don't just fix broken systems, you create stronger ones. Ones rooted in equity. In empathy. In lived truth. That clip, too, went viral. Desiree received letters from other mothers, some still grieving, others still afraid. She wrote back to everyone. She didn't promise answers. But she offered something better, hope. And solidarity. Because she knew how much it meant to feel seen. One winter, she and Marcus stood outside City Hall again, just like that night long ago. Snow was falling. The same building where she once stood trembling now held a plaque with her name on it. Marcus looked up at her. "You cold?" he asked. "No," she said. "Just remembering." He nodded. "I still remember that night too." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Desiree said, "It doesn't haunt me anymore. It fuels me." Marcus smiled. "Me too." Later, they walked home, bundled against the wind. The city lights glowed. The streets were quiet. Safe. And somewhere, another mother tucked her child into bed, unaware that her future had been shaped by a woman she'd never met, a woman who stood up, stayed strong, and kept going. Because justice doesn't stop. It grows. Years later, long after the headlines faded and the documentary stopped airing, Desiree walked through a neighborhood park where her movement had once hosted its first community meeting. The benches were newer now, the playground refurbished, murals covered the old concrete walls, portraits of unity, peace, courage. One mural showed a woman standing in front of her home, phone in hand, a determined look on her face. Beside her, a young boy, wide-eyed, standing tall. Underneath were the words, "One voice can change everything." A little girl ran past and called, "That's you, isn't it? My teacher said you helped fix the police." Desiree smiled. "I helped start the fixing," she said. "Now it's up to all of us to keep it going." She sat on a bench, looked around. Birds chirped. A father played catch with his son. Teenagers filmed a TikTok. Laughter floated through the air. And she thought, this is what it was always about. Not fame. Not recognition. But safety. Dignity. A world where children don't have to fear the very people sworn to protect them. A world where a mother can say no, and be heard. That night, Desiree pulled out an old notebook. The same one she used to write in after that night. The one with tear-stained pages, scribbled frustrations, and silent prayers. She opened to the last empty page. Wrote. "We are not what happens to us. We are what we do about it. I was afraid. But I stood. And now. We rise." She closed the notebook. Put it back on the shelf. And exhaled. Across town, Marcus sat in a meeting with city leaders. Now in his 20s, he wore a suit, spoke with calm authority. He was pushing a new policy, one that would require transparency in all police community interactions, and expand protections for marginalized groups. One council member asked, "Why is this so important to you?" He said, "Because I've seen what happens when the system fails. But I've also seen what happens when people care enough to fix it. My mother showed me that change doesn't wait, it walks in. It speaks up. It fights for those too tired to fight. And that's what I'm here to do." They approved the policy unanimously. As he left the chamber, his phone buzzed. A text from his mom. Just 2 words. "So proud." He smiled. Typed back. "It started with you." At the next community meeting, an older man stood up during the Q&A. He looked familiar, tall, serious face, gray at the temples. He said, "I used to wear a badge. I was trained to be tough, to control, to enforce. But after hearing your story, I realized I had forgotten how to serve. I just want to say thank you, for reminding me. Desiree nodded, humbled. Thank you for listening, she replied. That's what it had always been about, listening. Really listening. To the fear in someone's voice. To the pain in their silence. To the dignity in their resistance. Years ago, she had feared for her life. Now, she helped others reclaim theirs. The transformation was more than personal. It was generational. It was policy. Culture. Heart. And as long as injustice still whispered in alleyways, behind doors, in quiet traffic stops, she would keep going. Because justice isn't a destination. It's a discipline. A daily commitment. A conversation. One that starts with truth. And grows into legacy. One evening, at a national awards gala, Desiree received a Lifetime Impact honor. Marcus introduced her on stage. He spoke with tears in his eyes. My mom taught me to stand when I was scared, to speak when I felt small, and to love even when the world felt hateful. She didn't just protect me, she empowered me. She gave me the tools to build something better. And for that, I will never stop being grateful. The crowd rose. Flashbulbs popped. Desiree walked to the podium slowly. Looked out at the faces, young, old, uniformed, casual. And said, I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted to be safe. But if my fear helped someone else find courage, then every tear was worth it. We're not done. We're just beginning. And every one of you here, you're part of the story now. So let's keep writing it. Together. Thunderous applause followed. But even after the lights dimmed and the crowd dispersed, she didn't pause to celebrate too long. Because tomorrow, someone else would need help. Another call would come. Another voice would rise. And she would be there, listening, lifting, leading. Just like she always had. And so, the movement lived on. Not just in speeches or policies. But in the quiet bravery of mothers. In the watchful eyes of sons. In the echo of one phone call that became a rallying cry. A call that pierced the night. That reached the mayor. That changed everything. And that, in the end, reminded us all. That justice begins at home. And sometimes. One voice is all it takes. Months passed, seasons changed, but the ripple of that night never stopped. One summer afternoon, Desiree stood before a packed auditorium in Atlanta, invited to speak at a national forum on justice reform. She wore a simple white blouse, no jewelry, just her truth. As she stepped up to the microphone, the room quieted. I used to think justice was something handed down. A verdict. A ruling. A press release, she began. But now I know, justice is built. Daily. Locally. With hands and hearts. Applause followed. But more than the claps, it was the silence between them that mattered, the listening. After the speech, a young woman approached her. She was shaking. I'm a survivor, she whispered. Not just of violence, but of silence. I never told anyone what I saw the night my brother was taken. Desiree looked into her eyes. You just did, she said. And that's the beginning. That night, back in her hotel, Desiree wrote in her journal again. A single story can unlock 100 more. Sometimes the healing begins when the hush breaks. She closed the journal. Slept without nightmares for the first time in weeks. Across town, Marcus was speaking to students at a community college. He stood in front of a projector showing footage from The Call That Changed Everything. He paused the clip. Pointed at the frame of his mother on the screen. That, he said, is what it looks like when someone decides, enough. A student raised their hand. What's next for the movement? Marcus smiled. Schools. Curriculum. Empowerment from the ground up. We want to make justice part of education, not just reaction. And so they did. They partnered with educators, created a curriculum called Voices of Change. It taught high schoolers how to recognize injustice, how to engage with community leaders, how to use their voices effectively, not just emotionally. The pilot launched in 3 schools. Then 20. Then statewide. Desiree visited classrooms, heard stories from kids who never thought they had power. One student said, "I used to think grown-ups didn't care what we said. But now I know I matter." And that's when she knew. It wasn't about her anymore. It never really was. She was just the match. Now the fire of awareness, action, and accountability spread through hands she'd never held, and voices she'd never heard. One fall, Marcus received a letter. White envelope. Government seal. It was an offer to serve on a presidential youth advisory board for civic justice. He brought it to Desiree. "Should I?" he asked. She hugged him. "Son, you already are." He went. He sat across from senators and secretaries. He told them stories from his neighborhood, not just theories. And they listened. One of them asked him, "What's your ultimate goal?" Marcus paused, then answered. "To make what happened to us unthinkable for anyone else." Months later, a mural appeared downtown. It wasn't commissioned. No press. No unveiling. Just color and courage. Spray paint on brick. It showed a woman on the ground, bloodied, reaching for a phone. Above her, her son, standing, hand raised, phone to his ear. The words above. "Never again alone." People came from all over to see it. Left notes. Flowers. Candles. Some cried. Some knelt. All remembered. Desiree visited in the early morning once, before the crowds. She traced the outline of the boy's face, her son's. And whispered. "You saved me that night. And you keep saving others now." The next year, they opened a community justice center. Not a precinct. A place for healing. For education. Victims could report abuse without fear. Officers could receive counseling. Youth could learn their rights, and their power. They called it, the Call House. Marcus cut the ribbon. Desiree stood beside him. A reporter asked, "Why that name?" Desiree answered. "Because everything changed. With one call." One evening, a knock came at her door. She opened it. It was Officer Mitchell. The one who'd looked away that night. The one who didn't speak. Until now. He held his hat in his hands, eyes low. "I left the force," he said. "I couldn't keep being silent. I work with young cadets now. Teach them what I didn't know then." Desiree watched him carefully. "Why come here?" she asked. "To say thank you," he replied. "And I'm sorry." She didn't speak for a moment. Then nodded. "Teach them right," she said. "Teach them to listen before they shout. To protect before they punish." "I will," he said. "Because of you." At a candlelight vigil for victims of police violence, Desiree read names aloud. One by one. Each name lit a candle. Each flame a life once lived. When she finished, there was silence. Then a chant rose. "Not one more. Not one more. Not one more." It echoed down streets. Bounced off buildings. Reached City Hall. Marcus started writing a book. Title: The Night That Raised Us. He wrote between meetings. On trains. Late at night. Told the whole story, from his young eyes. The fear. The call. The change. It hit bestseller lists in a week. Schools began assigning it. Parents read it with their children. And suddenly, that night wasn't just theirs anymore. It belonged to all of us. One cold winter, Desiree was invited to speak at a global summit in Geneva. She stood before world leaders. Told the story in a whisper. The power of a single moment. The cost of inaction. Afterward, a delegate from Norway approached her. "We think of rights as laws," she said. "You reminded us, their lives." Years passed. Marcus married. Had a daughter. Named her Hope. Desiree held her for the first time and wept. Hope opened her eyes, big, bright, unafraid. And Desiree whispered. "You will never know the fear I knew. Not if we keep building." One day, a school installed a statue. Small, bronze. A woman kneeling. Phone in hand. Head turned, eyes wide, not in fear, but fire. On the base. The call that echoed. Children climbed on it. Asked who she was. Teachers told them. She was a mother. She stood up. And the world followed. Spring came again. And with it, a new challenge. A bill was proposed quietly, one that would roll back protections. Disguised in legal jargon. Buried in bureaucracy. But Marcus saw it. Caught the language. And sounded the alarm. Desiree stood beside him at the courthouse steps. This time not as a survivor. But as a leader. "We've come too far," she said into the mic. "Too many names. Too many candles. We will not go backward." The crowd roared. The cameras flashed. The bill didn't pass. Later that year, a documentary premiered on streaming. The Voice That Shook the City. It told the whole story, raw, unscripted. From bodycam footage to newsreels, from personal interviews to courtroom victories. It ended on a still frame of that gas station. The red shell lights glowing. The phone in her hand. The officers frozen behind her. Narrator's voice. One night. One voice. One call that rippled into revolution. Millions watched. Thousands reached out. Survivors found new courage. Whistleblowers came forward. Mothers found their voices. Desiree returned to that gas station once. Quiet. No fanfare. She stood under the lights. Listened to the hum of the night. Closed her eyes. Felt the fear again. Then felt it replaced. With power. With memory. With meaning. She placed a small plaque on the wall. It read. Here, one woman stood. So that others could rise. At a justice conference, an audience member asked Marcus. Do you forgive them? He paused. Looked out over the room. My mother taught me something, he said. She said healing and justice are not the same thing, but sometimes, they walk together. I don't forget. But I also don't carry hate. Because if I do, it wins. Silence. Then applause. The mayor who had answered the call retired. On his last day, he handed Desiree a letter. It said. You changed more than a city. You reminded us what service means. Thank you for saving my soul, too. Desiree was offered a government position. Oversight chair. National level. Big salary. Big spotlight. She declined. I serve better in neighborhoods than in buildings, she said. Keep the title. I've got work to do. And she did. She trained local advocates. Started a mentorship program for single parents. Opened a helpline for victims afraid to speak. Every story they shared, she carried it. Not as a burden. As a bond. One summer day, she visited a youth camp. Sat in a circle of teens. Told them the story, carefully, truthfully. One boy raised his hand. "Were you scared?" She nodded. "Every second." He asked. "How did you speak through it?" She said. "I didn't know how to be brave. I just knew I couldn't stay silent." And sometimes, that's all bravery is. They made a podcast about her journey. Episodes trended globally. A line from her became viral. "Justice isn't loud. It's consistent." Activists started using it on posters. Protesters whispered it in marches. Parents taped it on their refrigerators. The day came when Desiree slowed down. Not because she gave up, but because she'd given so much. She sat on her porch, watching the sunset. Marcus arrived with his daughter. Hope ran into her arms. She lifted the little girl. "Tell Grandma what you learned today," Marcus said. Hope beamed. Said proudly, "I learned I can call for help. And help can come from me, too." Desiree closed her eyes. Held that moment. The fear that had once gripped her life. Now replaced by legacy. By generations unafraid. She whispered. "This is what healing looks like." And as the sky turned orange and gold, she knew. Even if no one ever said her name again, the world was already different. Because one night, she stood. She spoke. And the world listened.